video at kitchener.ca/watch now. While in-person delegations are not feasible at this time, members of the public are invited to participate electronically in future meetings by contacting delegations at kitchener.ca to register as a delegation or submit written comments. This is a formal public meeting to consider applications under the Planning Act. If a person or public body does not make oral or written submissions to the City of Kitchener before the proposed applications are considered, the person or public body may not be entitled to appeal the decision to the Ontario Municipal Board and may not be added as a party to a hearing of an appeal before the Ontario Municipal Board. But before that, we'll just get the consent items out of the way. There are none. Item number 3-1, draft plan of condominium, vacant land, 60 Trustler Road for Elevate Properties, Inc. Mr. Schneider, you are presenting, so you have 5 minutes whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Chair Singh. Good evening. My name is Eric Schneider and I'm a planner at the City of Kitchener. I'm here tonight to speak to application 30 CDM 21207, which proposes a vacant land plan of condominium at 60 Trustler Road. On the next slide, I will briefly go over the site context. The lands are located near the western municipal boundary on Trustler Road near Highland Road West. The existing lot contains one single detached dwelling. To the north of the site is Hero DevTech, an existing manufacturing facility. The eastern and southern property lines abut existing homes on Cora Drive and Rauch Court. The next slide shows the draft plan of condominium. The owner of the subject lands is proposing a vacant land condominium that would consist of 5 units to be built with single detached dwellings. A private road, sidewalk, and landscaped areas would make up the common elements. This residential development, consisting of 5 single detached dwellings, is permitted on the lands as per the policies in the city's official plan and regulations in the zoning bylaw. The purpose of this application is not to determine permitted use, as single detached dwellings are permitted in this zone. Rather, the purpose of this application is to permit the individual ownership, the tenure of each of the residential units. On the next slide, the proposed site plan is shown. Through the circulation process, residents on Cora Drive express concerns about privacy as the drive aisle is proposed to abut their rear lot lines. The residents requested that rather than a 1.8 meter, 6-foot high fence that would be required to be erected to screen the drive aisle, that a 2.44 meter, 8-foot high fence be erected instead. The applicant has agreed to this fence, this increased fence height, and it will be addressed through the landscape plan during the site plan process. On the next slide, I'll offer concluding remarks. The proposed development conforms to provincial, regional, and city plans and is compatible with surrounding land uses, represents good planning, and as such, staff recommend that the draft plan of condominium be approved subject to the conditions outlined in the staff report. If there are any questions, I'm available to answer them at the appropriate time. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Appreciate that. There is a delegation for Scott Patterson, which is on behalf of the applicant. Mr. Patterson.
Good evening, Chair Singh and members of committee.
5 minutes.
Thank you for having me this evening. Nothing really further to add to Eric's presentation tonight. The proposal is for a vacant land plan of condominium, as he noted, for 5 units, which would contain single detached dwellings. The proposal is consistent with provincial policy statement, conforms to the growth plan, conforms to the City of Kitchener official plan, and also conforms to the regional official plan. The project meets all technical design standards of the city and the region. And I would like to thank planning staff for their efforts in diligently processing the application and for representing and addressing the public interest. Again, I'm here in full support of the staff report and recommendation. I would ask committee to support the draft approval, move it forward to council for a decision. And I'm here as well for any questions or concerns from committee members. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Patterson. Councillor Chapman?
Yeah, no, I'm happy to support this, but I just have a question, like why, if it complies with the official plan, the zoning bylaws and everything, why is it here? Is it just because of the fence? The height of the fence, or why is it before us today?
Well, that's a question that Eric can elaborate more on, but this is for a draft plan of condominium. It would have to come to council.
Oh, does it?
Right, but again, I would allow staff to please elaborate.
Yeah, thank you.
Anything?
Through the,
Yeah.
or sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, Councillor Chapman, do you have anything specific to Mr. Patterson beyond that?
No, that was my question. So whoever can answer it is fine. Thank you.
That's fine. There's no one else. So Eric, if you can.
Sure. Through the chair, the draft plan of vacant land condominium must get council approval, whereas standard and common element condominiums do not require that approval.
Okay. Mr. Patterson, there's no one else for questions. Thank you so much. And that's all we have for delegations. Do you have questions of staff? Councillor Ioannidis?
I'll just move the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Ioannidis. There's no one else. I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? And that carries. We'll go on to the next item, 3.2, draft plan of condominium vacant land demolition control for 99-109 North Hill Place and 29 Chicopee Terrace -99 North Hill Place, Inc. Mr. Schneider, you're up again.
Thank you, Chair. Next, I will speak to application 30 CDM 20206, which proposes a vacant land plan of condominium, and application DC 21019 NES, which requests demolition control approval, both for the property at 99-109 North Hill Place and 29 Chicopee Terrace. On the next slide, I will briefly go over the site context. The lands consist of 4 buildings on 3 parcels to be consolidated into one lot. The lands are located to the south of Chicopee Ski Hill and have frontage onto North Hill Place and Chicopee Terrace. The next slide shows the draft plan of condominium. The owner of the subject lands is proposing a vacant land condominium that would consist of 14 units to be built with single detached dwellings. A private road, sidewalk, retaining walls, and landscaped areas would make up the common elements. The residential development consisting of 14 single detached dwellings is permitted on the lands as per the policies in the city's official plan and regulations in the city's zoning bylaw. Again, the purpose of this application is not to determine permitted use, as single detached dwellings are permitted in this zone. Rather, the purpose of the application is to permit the individual ownership, tenure, of each of the residential units. On the next slide, I'd like to give some background on the progression that staff and the applicant worked through on the design of the site. The original submission proposed a sidewalk that would run alongside the neighboring existing home at 25 Chicopee Terrace. This was identified during public circulation to be a cause of concern regarding privacy. There was also no pedestrian connection provided to North Hill Place. On the next slide, the second submission addressed these problems. By switching the sidewalk to the opposite side of the drive aisle, which does not face a residential lot, a pedestrian connection to North Hill Place was also provided. However, the lot boundaries had been rearranged, which resulted in Unit 5 having its side yard face the rear yards of the existing homes on Chicopee Terrace. This was identified as an issue as it meant that a future building could be as little as 1.2 meters or 4 feet away from the rear lot lines of the residents on the north side of Chicopee Terrace. On the next slide, the final submission shows that the lot fabrics have been again rearranged, but this time to ensure that only backyards would face the existing lots on Chicopee Terrace, which would now provide a 7.5 meter or 25-foot minimum distance that a new building could be placed from the rear lot lines on Chicopee Terrace, rather than 4 feet. Staff are confident that the building separation proposed for these lots is consistent or better than typical residential development in the city of Kitchener, in which most backyards face other backyards in residential areas. In addition to the initial conversations that staff had with residents during the circulation period, last week, city staff, Ward Councillor Schneider, and the owner met with residents on site to answer questions and discuss the proposal. Issues raised included traffic, privacy, nuisance, and disruption during construction. Staff have worked with the applicant to address these issues, and as a result, the applicant has agreed to the following measures: locating light standards on the side of the road furthest from existing homes and shielding light to prevent light trespass, regrading to capture the flows that currently exist on the adjacent property on Chicopee Terrace, demolishing the current homes as soon as possible to limit trespassers and vandalism. Detailed review of driveway grading will be undertaken at the site plan stage to see if the driveway can be flattened to limit sliding risk at the stop sign during winter conditions. Private winter maintenance obligations in the condominium declaration as per standard practice. And finally, low-level decorative landscaping and entry features to limit headlight glare where possible. Regarding the issue of traffic, staff advised that the current traffic levels on Chicopee Terrace and Volta Ave are low, and that the addition of 14 units would not meet the threshold for a traffic impact assessment. Transportation services staff confirmed the existing roads are designed to carry a much higher traffic load, and the additional traffic from the proposed development at peak AM and PM periods would be well within the current thresholds for residential streets. Still, residents questioned whether access could be provided from North Hill Place rather than Chicopee Terrace, as the site has access and frontage on both. Staff explained that North Hill Place is an undersized road that does not meet modern standards for road width, sidewalks, servicing, or emergency services access, whereas Chicopee Terrace is a fully operational road with a width of 20 meters and access to full services. Hypothetically, if North Hill Place was to be expanded and resurfaced to provide access to this development, it would represent a significant challenge in cost. Firstly, the Grand River Conservation Authority owns the lands that comprise of Chicopee Ski Hill, who leases the land from the GRCA, and the road would need to be expanded into this area in order to provide access. Following last week's on-site meeting with residents, staff followed up with the GRCA on this prospect, and were informed that the GRCA itself does not have the authority to sell lands for development purposes. As conservation authorities are governed by the province, they decide how GRCA land can be used, and approval from the province would be required for the sale of the lands. Secondly, the cost to reconstruct and service North Hill Place would be significant. Following the on-site meeting last week, staff reached out to the engineering division to get a preliminary cost estimate on these potential works. Staff found out that the cost to resurface North Hill Place, not including the expansion of asphalt and the cost to acquire lands, would be approximately $1.5 million. Conversely, the cost to service as proposed on Chicopee Terrace, where full services are available, would be approximately $33,000. Staff will continue to work with the applicant through the development phases to ensure that resident concerns are addressed, mitigated, and resolved wherever possible. On the next slide, I'll offer concluding remarks. The proposed development conforms to provincial, regional, and city plans, is compatible with surrounding land uses, and represents good planning. As such, staff recommend that the draft plan of condominium be approved, subject to the conditions outlined in the staff report. Again, if there's any questions, I'm available to answer them at the appropriate time. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. We'll circle back for questions of staff after we have the delegations. Mr. Patterson, this is your application as well, acting on behalf of the applicant. Again, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair Singh. Just had to wait for my internet to reconnect. Again, hello committee, and thank you for having me this evening. Once again, nothing really further to add to Eric's summary or presentation. I'd like to thank him for doing that and providing the details that he did. Once again, we have a project before a committee that conforms to all zoning requirements and all design and technical requirements of the City of Kitchener and the region of Waterloo. We would ask that the demolition control be as soon as possible. As per Eric's comments at the meeting last week, we were advised of trespass and potential vandalism in existing buildings. So we would like to proceed with their removal to rectify that issue. But here in full staff report and recommendation, if I could answer any questions of me, or happy to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Patterson. I'll see if there's any questions of you. Councillor Marsh?
Yeah, so the grading of this location it's higher, right, than Chicopee Terrace?
Through you, Chair Singh, yes, it is.
So I'm a little confused about how the property will be regraded for the new units without having a serious impact on both the ski hill and on the other residents. Can you help us understand, like, will you be having retaining walls, and what's the plan for that?
Again, through you, Chair Singh, and thank you for the question. With my limited engineering knowledge, please keep that in mind. But yes, a functional servicing report and grading plan was prepared and submitted to the staff for review. It does show the use of retaining walls just to make the site function from a servicing perspective and to meet existing grades. There will be, like I said, use of retaining walls in different locations. Some of them featured in the common elements that would be controlled by the condo corporation. Some of them are actually on the private units themselves, but would also be making the condominium declaration and would be under the care and maintenance of the condo corp as well. But yes, the intent is to match existing grades around the outside property limits through retaining walls or through matching existing grades. And then all works would be contractual property boundaries for modifications to make the site work.
Okay, thanks. So just out of curiosity, was this particular plot of land formerly owned by GRCA and then was sold for, to add income? Is that, do you know if that's how this came to be right on the ski hill?
Again, through you, Chair Singh, to the best of my knowledge, my client purchased it from individual property owners. I'm not aware of the history of how those property owners came to own the parcels that they do. I do know that the lands that have frontage directly onto North Hill Place have been there for a considerable amount of time. They're large lots. They have older homes on them, one of which has a stone foundation, I believe. So yes, those have been there for a considerable amount of time. And the house on Chicopee Terrace naturally was constructed at the time of that subdivision and that development.
Thank you.
Councillor Chapman?
Yeah, excuse me. I was wondering if you could just speak a bit to the tree canopy and if there I mean, this might come later in the process, but are trees going to be coming down? How many, and how are they going to be replaced?
Through you, Chair Singh. Again, through the city's site plan approval process, a tree management plan has been prepared and submitted to the city for staff review. It was part of the approval in principle process, and we do have approval in principle for this development. There are trees granted that will be removed, and there are trees that will be saved. If you look at the draft plan layout, there are common element areas that are outside of the unit boundaries, so not under the actual homeowners' lands. And we've done that specifically to protect trees where we could. In other areas, there are trees that are part of the common element naturally. And there will be a requirement for street tree planting on a private street that will come through the city's process as well. So I don't have the specific number of trees that will be removed. There will be some naturally, but we're making best efforts where we can to save trees, and there will be a requirement for compensation planting that will occur on site as well.
Okay, thank you.
I don't see anyone else. Mr. Patterson, thank you so much. Committee, if I turn my video off, it's not because I walked away. It's my internet connection may be poor, so I may have to turn the video off. We will go on to our other delegations. Next up is Darren Panett. Welcome.
Thank you, Council. Is it possible to have you bring up the site context slide again? I'd like to address something on that.
Diane, are you able to sit? Our clerk will have that up if it's available to us.
Let me just start by saying that, first of all, calling this development North Hill anything is kind of a slap in the face to us residents of Chicopee Terrace. This road, North Hill Place, that now has 4 homes on it, after the demolition will have 1 home on it, which will be plowed every year by the city and maintained by the city for this 1 house. Now, the councillor Schneider, when he came to us, was telling us that the reason for this private drive directly next to my house was because they could not access the road with a fire truck or emergency equipment. Well, if that's the case, then it's the city's responsibility, pardon me, to update this road regardless of our concerns as residents on Chicopee Terrace. Now, yes, if you bring up the site context slide, you'll see at the top left hand, there's a road called North Hill Place. Now that road will now have 1 house on it. And these other 14 homes will have the private drive that goes up Volta, Vista, and also cutting through Chicopee Terrace, increasing the traffic. I know the councillor said that it wasn't going to affect the traffic and so on as far as their surveys go, but we live in a cul-de-sac with a dead-end street. There are 100 children who play out here already, and we don't need the access here to allow for accidents and so on. Also, there is a huge walking path that cuts through the hydro line here. It's a trail, a city trail, and now at least 28 cars, because we've been told by the developer that there will be 14 homes with 2-car garages in them. And also, council, I've also been informed that there's no parking on that street up there that they're developing. So everybody who goes, say somebody has a 50th anniversary party, everybody who knows that couple, their family, will be parking on Chicopee Terrace and the surrounding streets, because there's no parking on this new development. Also, have they done an environmental study on this land? Because I know that it's all well water back there, that nothing has been plumbed in for residences. And these wells are probably pretty old. And I'm just wondering if anyone's done any environmental studies on the well water, the surrounding land, anything. Also, Councilman Schneider stated that these roads were not adequate to access this area, but Again, if they're not adequate, the city needs to upgrade these regardless of whether a new development goes back there or not. He already said it didn't meet the standards. So we do believe as residents of Chicopee Terrace that this all comes down to money, and Councilman Schneider agrees. He said it was $1.some million as opposed to $33,000. Well, our privacy, our safety, and the safety of our children is priceless to us. We as taxpayers will pay that money if we have to in order to get this road created and for us to have a little bit more privacy. I didn't move into this neighborhood 3 years ago to have 14 houses built directly behind me. If you look at this map, my house is the one directly next to this driveway that they're putting in here. And I don't know if the councilor is aware of this, but right next to that driveway, there's a sidewalk on one side, and the other side, which is directly against my house, is allotted for snow removal and to pile snow up there. Now that means at 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the morning, when their private tractor comes out, because it's not city owned, they'll be plowing all this snow right up against my yard and my house, essentially. Also adding lighting, which will come into my windows. It's just, and increasing everything. I understand my 5 minutes is probably up. I just want council to know that we got together last week as a community, everyone showed up, and we are really against this private drive coming in here, regardless of how much money it's going to be saving the city. You can't name a place, North Hill something, and then not even use North Hill Place Road. I think it's ridiculous now that there's one house left on that road that our taxpayers are paying to plow every year, to maintain every year for that one house. So that's my time. Thank you, council.
Thank you, Darren. I see no questions. Thank you for presenting
Thank
your
you.
viewpoint. Next up is Randy Dunn. Randy, welcome. You have 5 minutes to make your presentation.
Sorry there, I was technical difficulties here.
No, that's okay.
Anyways, okay, good evening, Chair Singh, Mayor and councilors. My name is Randy Dunn, as you already got. I've been a lifetime resident of Kitchener, as has many generations of my family and many branches of my family. Kitchener, Waterloo, we've all been here. And for the last, say 3-4 decades, 3 decades I've lived where I am here now, up on Chicopee Terrace. And the last 4 decades, I've been dreaming of having a peaceful retirement up here. And now I finally reached that point. And now I have to, I guess, deal with construction in my backyard by the sounds of it. But I do have question when it in regards to that. I keep hearing that the zoning on these properties, and to put 14 properties, is well within zoning right now. Now, from what I understand, we have three houses already on the, or pardon me, 4 houses on the 3 properties currently, which does meet our zoning. So to add another 10 on there, okay, it won't meet our zoning until we approve another 10 lots. So we have 14 lots to accommodate that. Now, I would also like to comment, I wanted to bring that up, but the original letter that I got back in last year, October 2020, regarding this, it did say that I would have received, anybody that wrote in at that time would receive its staff report emailed to them. I did not receive one of those. Mind you, I did get one today when I signed up as a delegate. One of the people that signed me up there, she helped me out, and she mailed one. So I scanned through it, and I noticed on it that at one point, like I didn't get a chance to read the whole thing, which was too bad, because it would have been nice to be able to read it before this meeting. And same with to see these new drawings before this meeting. I've never seen these new drawings either. And I've been in communication with both Councillor Snyder and Mr. Eric Snyder. Several emails, some of which didn't make the report neither. But in this report, it says about demolition control. It says the intent of demolition control bylaw is to prevent premature loss of dwelling units. Okay. Now I have a question as far as what denotes premature loss. And it requires to have, they say that there's a difficulty here with the vacant land condominium, because when you have the situation where it's already meeting zone 3, you can't, you need some, I guess, building permits, but you can't get the building permits till you have the old houses tore down and made lots. So it's like a catch-22 situation. But it says here in this little piece of the report that I did read that the staff, their opinion is that it meets this criteria. Okay. Now, I'm not real comfortable in saying it meets that criteria, because those houses that are currently there, they were lived in right before this happened. And they've been lived in for decades. I've been up here, and my neighbors have been here for decades, like 40 years, a lot of them. I've been on this property with my in-laws for at least 40 years. Now, when I was a kid, I was part of those 40 years, but I've owned it for over 30. And like I say, my dream is to have a quiet backyard where I already knew that I had one neighbor back there, but I already knew that it was zone 3 zoning, which allowed for one single family dwelling or one duplex, as far as I understood. It didn't allow somebody to just come in and say, okay, we're going to buy this. We're going to make it one big land. Now we're going to make it 14 lots, and away we go. We're all happy about it. Now, with that in mind, I realize you're probably going to stick it in there, and I appreciate the efforts that the new owner has been to try to take care of our problems. But one of the big one is the way the road comes down onto Chicopee Terrace. And a big problem with that is I brought this up way back in November last year. So it could have been looked into during that period of time from November until now. We were told that GRC was contacted and that they said, well, I heard different stories on that. Well, first I heard about fire trucks. They need 12 meters. Then I found out that they need 6 meters. And then I found out that that road is 4.5 for about 20 feet. And that's the problem. And so for the extra 4.5 feet, 1.5 meters, they couldn't ask the GRCA. I asked if there was a proposal submitted to GRCA for that land, because I know the city has gotten land from GRCA before when they run into these difficulties. And apparently there wasn't even anything checked into it until after we had our meeting last week, by the sounds of it. Same with the costing on that. Meantime, we heard that the cost was exorbitant. Okay. I heard different things that, oh, it might be because of the environmentally sensitive land. But these are things that I didn't see any proof of. And now I'm finding out that my suspicions were correct, that they actually weren't looked into correctly, so that we could actually look into this and satisfy everybody. So we do have a problem with you running it down here, because Kitchener is a place where it's a small town living, and we have that because we're not all on top of each other. We have a less dense areas, and we have these little pockets with less dense areas, and we enjoy that. Keeps us a small town living with big town amenities downtown. It's a little more like big town downtown because your density is higher. So we have diversity throughout this whole city, and it's great to see. But all us people in here, combined, you got hundreds of years of living in this area, on this street, hundreds of years, that these people all did that for one reason, and they all stay here until they die for one reason, because of the tranquility. Right now, I'm sitting in my backyard. You were at the one councilor was asking about trees. You can see what I have. Okay, this is behind me. I'm going to now have housing. Okay, I can stand in my kitchen window. I can watch skiers go up. Okay, I'm sorry, and I appreciate your time and efforts. I do have one.
Right.
Can I ask one more thing, really quickly,
Sure,
councilors? The meeting that we had last week, we had a bunch of people sign a petition, and that's how this meeting got arranged, so that we could talk face to face and have some come and going. But the people signing the petition, not all of them have access to this type of meeting or anything, but they would like to all be included if it has to, if they choose to go to tribunal. They would like to be included because they signed that sheet and sent it in, and hopefully that qualifies for that inclusion. And thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Randy. Appreciate that. Let's see if there are questions. Councillor Schneider, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Singh. Randy, thank you for appearing tonight and thank you for organizing the residents meeting on Friday. I want to assure you that, and my fellow councilors probably nod their heads, that I did take notes and I did send a document, a recap of those notes and an illustration of the property and everything. So they're well aware of all the comments and concerns that were brought up. So I just want to reiterate that am I correct in saying that the main concern with this from the residents is the access? The residents would like the access to be from North Hill Drive.
Thank you, Councillor Snyder. Currently that's what it seems to be pointing to. That's because we're looking at it and saying that chances are you're not going to say that subdivision can't go in there, because currently the land does meet zone 3 zoning, and currently it all falls within that current proposal before the land gets subdivided. So I know, I mean, I could maybe you'll look at it and say, oh, we can't subdivide it because it's already sitting there. But chances are you're not gonna. So our next major concern then is the road. To have it, I mean, the new owner there, and with the proposal, it looks like that the new proposal that we didn't see any of, it looks like he's taken a good job on satisfying a lot of our comments. And thank you very much to him. But you are correct that the major thing, if we are going to have that subdivision back there, is that we can get it out through North Hill Place, as opposed to coming down through Volta and across Chicopee Terrace and through Volta, because it's going to bottleneck down there. You know, we already have a traffic problem up at Fairway and River Road there. It's been getting worse over the last few years. We have a lot of accidents up there. We have a lot of people that don't know red is red. They don't realize red is something you stop at. They figure that it means jam your foot to the floor and get through there before the next guy runs into you. And so we've had an increase with that. And it's not going to get any better with another possibly 30 vehicles coming through. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, okay. I just wanted to have it absolutely clear that's the number one concern. There's other concerns with privacy and with stormwater management, especially during construction, that I want to ask staff further about. Thank you.
And thank you, Councillor Snyder. I think you got pretty much all the concerns. And thank you for taking good notes.
Thank you, Councillor Schneider, and thank you, Randy. That seems to be all the questions for you. We appreciate you coming forward and putting your perspective to council. Next up is Dieter, I think, Grzela. My apologies if mispronounced.
Through the chair, I do not believe that Dieter is on the call.
Okay, all right. In that case, that's all the registered delegations. If committee has questions of staff, please proceed. Councillor Schneider, go ahead.
Thank you so much, Chair Singh. I really want to thank Eric Schneider and Garrett Stevenson for putting on this resident meeting, and for Randy for organizing the residents. It was really helpful to hear all the concerns, and I want to thank staff too for a very quick follow-up on getting some of those costs with regards to running infrastructure on North Hill Place as opposed to this proposed access. That gives us a pretty good idea of the costs that we would have to consider as council. I'm wondering, either Eric or Garrett, if we would have any idea or how long it might take to get an estimate at what the cost of total reconstruction for North Hill Place would be. We know the infrastructure, the estimate of the infrastructure cost, but you know, how much would actually reconstructing the whole road cost? And could that be, that cost be discovered in a fairly short period of time, do you think?
Thank you, Councillor Schneider. Through the chair, yes, I think we could contact engineering and get a more fulsome estimate that included the asphalt and the soils and the other things that weren't included in that servicing estimate. I think we could probably have that this week from our engineering division.
Okay, and I'd like to check with the owner too, the developer, to see if they would be amenable to providing an 8-foot high privacy fence along the property line that's shared with the homes that would back onto it on Chicopee Terrace. So 3, 7, 11, 15, 21, and 25. Also, another concern that was brought up that quite often during the meeting by the residents was worry about a stormwater flow during construction and things like that. So I would love to get a commitment from the developer about a fence and about the overland stormwater flow issues at the time of constructions and during the site plan process. So do we think we could connect with them and get answers on that before our next council meeting on the 20th?
Through the chair, the applicant is here tonight. Perhaps they can answer the questions that you had regarding the 8-foot high fence. If they do want to discuss, I'm sure we can absolutely get an answer before council next week. But I just wanted to point out that through the site plan process, the applicant has agreed to install and maintain erosion and sedimentation control and tree protection fencing in accordance with the approved plans to prevent the discharge of silt to waterways, open channels, city regional storm sewers, highways, and neighboring properties. So in terms of the commitment during construction to mitigate stormwater management concerns, I believe that has been addressed and it will be addressed through the site plan agreement. And the owner, by agreeing to this development proposal, has agreed in writing to that.
Okay. And I don't want them to, have to rush and make a decision on the fence tonight. If they want to discuss this, that's great. But I wonder if we give them like a week, would that be enough time for that?
Yes, in my opinion, yes. Through the
Okay.
chair. Thank you.
Okay. Well, with that, I'd like to move a very short deferral on this. And I did send something to clerks in advance of this, but the idea is to defer until September 20th for staff to provide a cost estimate for reconstruction of North Hill Place from Fairway Road to the development, to receive confirmation the developer is amenable to providing that fence. And I know it has been discussed, it was just assured about the water flow issues, but I would like those they're in writing, but just absolute confirmation of that. And so council is fully aware of all the costs involved in this, so they can base their decision on this based on financial facts. So I would like to.
All right. So we will take that as a deferral. Thank you, Councillor Schneider. And I think that's fairly reasonable for us to know what that alternative would be if the access point was through North Hill. But obviously staff have presented that the cost is significant, but having more detailed information definitely helps for the public perspective to have that understanding as well. So I think that's the prudent way to proceed. And again, giving the owner time to discuss, negotiate with staff, as well as hopefully take your input on the privacy of the adjoining neighbors. And hopefully the site plan approval process would have addressed the stormwater issues through the planning process, but having that, having that information up front helps to mitigate the concerns laid out by the delegations tonight. So that's great. Thank you. In that case, we have a deferral on the floor. I will allow questions of staff, and after which point then rather than making comments about the application, if there are questions or comments pertinent to the deferral, those would be what are taken, but I'll allow committee members to have their questions answered to staff on the main motion. Councillor Johnston, I think you're up next.
Yes, thank you, Chair Singh, and through you, I wanted to follow up on one of the concerns that I believe it was Mr. Dunn had raised with regards to the communication piece to the neighbors with regards to the information, the staff report being sent to them. So I'm wondering if perhaps Mr. Schneider could comment on that, would be appreciated.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Through the chair, the letters that we send out to residents, just because of the time it takes to get the letters printed out and mailed out and delivered to residents, at that time, the staff report is not fully ready and edited and ready for clerks to be sent out. So what we do is we send a link to the website where the residents can find the staff report when it is available and information on when it will be available. Now, in saying that, speaking with Mr. Dunn last week and some other residents at the meeting, they did express concerns with this method and that there are elderly people that aren't as comfortable using computers and that we should maybe go back to a more old school approach where we're sending out letters in the mail, and staff, myself and Mr. Stevenson, the manager of development review, certainly listened to those concerns and we're certainly taking those into consideration. We do have a development services review that we're looking at other options like sending out postcards and newspaper ads, new signs that are posted. So we're always exploring new possibilities and trying to connect with residents as best we can. But we've certainly heard those comments from Mr. Dunn and the other residents, and we've taken them into account.
Yeah, thank you. And I appreciate that, Mr. Schneider. I think that the more that we hear from neighbors, we know that they really want to be kept up to date with the communications as much as possible. So I appreciate that we're looking at kind of a variety of ways of being able to communicate with people. I think it's always important though for us to hear that from residents and to be reminded that that getting more access to information is better than less. So thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor Johnston. Next up is Councillor Marsh.
Thank you, Chair Singh. Yeah, I was wondering about that letter question as well. Perhaps even just an email to be sent with a link would be helpful for future. And what I want to know is one of the letters that was included in the report was not from another resident, but from the other neighbor, the ski club, and they were asking for a fence. Has that been included in some of the requirements for this development?
Thank you, Councillor Marsh. Through the chair, I was in contact with the chairman of the board at Chicopee Ski Hill and in regards to a couple of issues or questions that he had. One was the request of the fence to make sure that the future potential residents in this new development wouldn't encroach into their yards. And the second was for a noise warning clause. So unfortunately, we talked to the applicant, we can certainly request it, but our policies right now stipulate that a fence can be required along a drive aisle or a parking area to mitigate those impacts, but we can't require a fence along a rear property line that abuts other private property. The expectation is that the homeowner, when they move in, will put up their fence. And we certainly let them know that if Chicopee does have concerns with encroachment, that they are perfectly able to erect their own chain link fence along their property line to make sure that those encroachments don't happen. So the noise warning clause was included in the conditions that the region requested as noise is their purview, and they've identified that the snowmaking machines and other operations at the ski hill could cause concern.
Yeah.
So that item was addressed, but yeah, unfortunately with the fence, we can't require it with our current bylaws right now.
Okay, so council direction cannot require it.
Procedurally, through the chair, sorry, procedurally, I wouldn't know the answer to that. We could certainly, again, we could include that with the discussions on the fence that is being considered for the properties that abut Chicopee Terrace, but we could also consider that and speak to the applicant.
Why not? Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Singh. And thanks to all the delegations who came in this evening, as well as staff for your work, and Councillor Schneider for your work on this. A couple things, since we are going to, it appears, be considering this deferral motion, and I presume it will pass. As we look at the costs of North Hill Terrace, I'd also like to understand whether or not any improvements to that road would be DC eligible. So, could they be paid for through the development charges? And I'd also like to understand, therefore, what are the development charges that this project would generate, as well as what roughly on an annual basis, what are the taxes that this project would generate, so that we're looking at it in the full, having the full picture, not only looking at the cost, but also understanding some of the revenues that could go towards the work that needs to be done. So that's the one piece. I presume if North Hill would become a routing going forward, after this comes back next week, would that then potentially move the concern that the one delegation had with respect to the snow storage area, which I guess would be next to property at 29 Chicopee Terrace? And if that wouldn't be the case, could it be the case, I guess, going forward? And the last point that I will make is, if we're dealing with noise and putting noise conditions in, did we only put noise conditions in pertaining to the ski hill, or did we also put noise conditions in with respect to the landing path for the airport, as we have in other new developments to the east of Lackner Woods, because of the height here and so on. I know that the ski hill is an area that Transport Canada continues to have interest in, because of the role, sort of the height it has in relation to the landing path. And so we should probably look, if we haven't already, at having that noise clause in the agreement as well.
Okay, all right. Sure, staff will take some of those points. Mr. Schneider?
Yes, through the chair. For point number one, we can absolutely add those to this deferral motion and look into that, those more detailed financial considerations for next week. For point number two, any realignment of the units here and access onto North Hill Place would certainly require the unit boundaries to be realigned, and it would almost likely result in that snow storage area being moved because of the way the accesses would be located. And for point number three, the region did include the flight path information in the noise warning clauses. It's in the conditions in the report. So yes, that is included.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't see anyone else for questions of staff. So I will call the vote for the deferral. All those in favor? Opposed? And the deferral motion carries. Thank you very much. I look forward to getting that extra information for September 30th. On to the next item, which is item number 4-1, which is City of Kitchener manual update. Jason Brule, you are presenting. You have 5 minutes. Mr. Brule is an engineering technologist and will has a 5-minute PowerPoint presentation. Go ahead whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Chair Singh. Good evening. My name is Jason Brule, and I'm an engineering technologist on the development engineering team in the Development Services Department. And I'm going to present the City of Kitchener Development Manual update for your consideration and approval. Next slide, please. The Development Manual is a highly specialized and technical document that guides development and construction within the City of Kitchener. It is nearly 200 pages of standards, specifications, and administrative processes, primarily used by consulting engineers, contractors, landscape architects, and to a lesser degree planners. The manual provides direction required to achieve development approvals, acquisition of building permits, and aids in overall successful construction. Depicted are various stages of the process from drawing to construction. Next slide, please. Until 2010, the city utilized its subdivision manual as the reference document for the development works. It was a collection of the standards and guidelines from multiple departments that shaped the city. Next slide, please. In May of 2010, staff took to council the first version of the development manual. It provided a comprehensive overview of the administrative procedures for development applications. It also updated obsolete standards and specifications to make it current. Technology changes or shifts in industry compel us to review and update our standards periodically. Today's update is doing just that. Next slide, please. So today's updated version of the development manual received input from multiple internal and external stakeholders. External included the Grand River Conservation Authority, Kitchener-Wilmot Hydro, the Waterloo Region Home Builders Association, from whom we had a working group with members of the Kitchener Development Liaison Committee, local consulting engineering firms, and surrounding municipalities. We also even received input from as far away as Portland, Oregon, and San Francisco, California, with respect to our typical cross sections and our incorporation of low impact development into them. Next slide, please. Many city departments were consulted in the update process. These include building, engineering, construction, engineering, design and approvals, planning, environmental planning, kitchen utilities, gas and water, sanitary and storm utilities, operations, parks and cemeteries, operations, roads and traffic, and transportation. Next slide, please. 3 major projects that shape how the city administers construction, both new development and reconstruction, were completed from 2016 through 2019. These include the Integrated Stormwater Management Master Plan, the Urban Design Manual Update, and Complete Streets Guidelines. The outcomes from those documents have been included in the 2021 version of the updated manual. Ultimately, those plans and guidelines spell out what is to be constructed, and the development manual tells us how to do it. Next slide, please. Seen here is a theoretical cross-section through a busy urban street. These next few slides may seem familiar as they were utilized in both the Urban Design Manual Update and the Complete Streets presentation to Council. The conscious decision was made by those of us involved in these initiatives to use the same slides to reinforce that coordination was considered in each. Next slide, please. So the areas outlined in the dashed magenta colored line indicate the scope of the Urban Design Manual. It's focused on a built form and site design of the private development along the street, but also works to address the streetscape, pedestrian experience, and other factors, to create a well-designed public realm. Next slide, please. The area surrounded by the dashed green line encompasses the extent of the Complete Streets Guidelines. They provide new design standards for new streets and reconstructed streets, with guidance on all forms of transportation and street features within the right-of-way. Next slide, please. The development manual, area shown here in the cyan dash line, provides the technical standards for all infrastructure, utilities, stormwater management, block rating, and more. It is the guiding document for subdivisions, site plans, and streets. Next slide, please. Combined, it looks something like this. Each project has its area of focus and expertise, and where elements overlap, we coordinate to ensure the best possible outcomes. The development manual plays an important role in the others, as it is the glue that holds it all together. Coordination of the servicing or the interface of the grading between the site and the right-of-way are key elements of the development manual. Next slide, please. So solicitation for comments began in February of 2017. It was a general request for any changes or tweaks proposed by all the various stakeholders. A working group of city staff was assembled to review and contemplate all the requests received. After the initial changes were made, 4 other circulations took place. This allowed for refinement of not only the changes being requested, but also the document itself. It also ensures that the comments received were understood correctly and implemented as intended. Next slide, please. Shown here are screenshots of some of the tracking sheets developed to organize both the comments received as well as responses to them. A 3-phase hierarchy was established and color coding was applied to make this evident. Traffic signal lights were the inspiration for the color coding. In this instance, red means that the requested change was reviewed and considered, but is not being implemented in the manual. Yellow comments that, although are not being implemented in this version of the manual, do remain intriguing, and more debate on their validity for future updates is still being considered. Finally, the green are those that are agreed with and have been included in this update. It is important to note that all requests were given proper consideration, and response to each of them are included in these sheets. These were then circulated to the stakeholders for transparency in the process and to provide them with reasoning as to why something may not have been included. Next slide, please. The best way to graphically show some of the biggest impacts and culmination of the updates provided are through the city's typical cross sections. This is the current approved typical cross section for a local street found in residential neighborhoods, providing access to properties throughout the city. A lot of the issues and opportunities shown as drawing are carried through the other typical sections we have for various street classifications. Note the width of the lanes, the width of the sidewalk, the lack of stormwater management solutions, and pavement composition. These have all been addressed through the update process and the integration of the standards from the various new city initiatives. Next slide, please. Although they appear extremely similar to the existing cross-section, there are some significant changes that need to be pointed out. Working from the top down, the first noticeable change is the width of the paved surface of the road. The lane widths have been narrowed, which has positive impacts on both traffic calming and stormwater management, as reduced hard surface means reduced runoff. This also yields larger boulevard space, which supports tree growth and health. The next difference to note is the width of the sidewalks. The increase in size from 1.5 meters wide to 1.8 meters wide, about 1 foot, may seem small, but is a significant change for how pedestrians, including those in mobility assistance devices, are able to navigate their neighborhoods safely. The underground infrastructure also received updating. The biggest change comes from the introduction of low impact development, or LID, into our streets. Storm sewer is allowing for exfiltration of stormwater into the existing soil beneath it. This is of course dependent upon the location of the street and any potential site-specific constraints that could prevent the implementation of the LID component, such as high groundwater or soils that are conducive to infiltration. It should be noted that even if the street has these constraints, this section is still utilized. The storm sewer just behaves as it has prior to LID, but the other important changes to the section are still implemented. The final thing to point out is the road base composition. The values for base asphalt and the granitors, or the stone underneath, are greater than the existing section indicates. These were increased to support structure number, a value used to determine the efficacy of the road, such that it is at its required strength while still at base asphalt. This will translate into better roads being assumed by the city in new development and increased longevity in the lifespan of new roads. Next slide, please. This alternative can be utilized where soils are very conducive to infiltration for the various street classifications. The biomedia area in the boulevard will promote infiltration of runoff within the boulevard and will pre-treat any flow that exceeds the boulevard's ability to infiltrate, as it will be then sent back to the gutter and into the storm sewer. Next slide, please. In the proposed cul-de-sac section, the lane width has been decreased slightly to keep it consistent with the other updated sections. The sidewalk has been increased as well. But the biggest change in this section is the addition of the swim feature in the center bulb. What was once dead space is now utilized to help the city achieve its stormwater goals and add some tree canopy. Next slide, please. So through this update, 3 other important city documents have been brought together. Initiatives from safe pedestrian and resident mobility to implementation of low impact development has been achieved. Further, city standards and specifications have been updated to current best practices. It must be noted that collaboration with industry stakeholders and city staff was invaluable in this exercise. Next slide, please. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Brule. I appreciate the thorough report. I'll see if there are any questions of staff or the consultant. Councilor Chapman, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. I mean, it's the first I've ever heard of this document. And I was actually surprised when I tried to access the one that's currently being used. The only way I could get it was to ask for it, rather than it just being a link within the city website. So anyway, one of my questions has to do with sustainability features. And I wonder if you could just tell us how that was addressed in the creation of this manual. Like, I didn't see any reference, for example, to permeable surfaces, green areas, environmentally sustainable materials, etc.
Through the chair, a lot of the sustainability features are implemented through site plan or other development applications. Other sustainable aspects, if you will, to what is happening in the development it has already been included through the Complete Streets Guidelines or the Integrated Stormwater Management Master Plan and their initiatives. If you look at the cross sections, there are many sustainable features within them, including all the LID features that are within the cross sections themselves.
So, okay, that's fine. I guess I just wondered if there was an opportunity here to make it more front and center. And, you know, we've declared this climate emergency, and, you know, these features, you know, you do talk about the different surfaces that would be used, the materials that would be used in the different components of the development process. But anyway, that's just one of my questions. Another question I had was, you know, when it comes to looking at suburban developments, you know, we talk a lot about the countryside line, and I'm sure, as you know, when we think about suburban developments, that's a question that will inevitably arise. And how does that figure into this development manual?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Chapman. Through the chair, I'm not sure how that has impact through the manual. Obviously, the standards and guidelines that we use in the manual are utilized in determining the land use applicability that would ultimately push out the countryside line potentially. So I guess in a roundabout way, that's how it would be useful in that procedure or in that process.
Through the chair, perhaps I'll jump in. So the regional official
Also,
plan.
Mr. Reedman, as you try to help answer that question too, I think I'll just help qualify Councillor Chapman's question. So the question is obviously, you know, how does the manual help address the, you know, urban sprawl? So if the detail can be given, does the guidelines, are they more flexible in the infill or within our urban boundary as opposed to new subdivisions, so that it allows for you know, some encouragement or incentivization to have more density increase as opposed to growing out? So if you can qualify on that as well. Thank you.
Through the chair. So the development manual really provides the technical details for the road, the cross section, and the below ground surfaces, and to a certain extent the grading on development sites. But really, it's up to the planning documents that provide the guidance for. So it's the region's official plan, which identifies the countryside line. It's our official plan update, which would talk about sort of flexibility on infill and different types. And so this document that's in front of council today really is talking about, you know, how the roads and the public rights of way get constructed in subdivisions or in reconstructions of roadways. And so there's that one slide that showed the three different areas where those documents interplay. And so the urban design guidelines is what talks about the built form and what buildings look like. The regional official plan is what provides, you know, what's allowed on specific properties and what the development looks like. And so this really is about the technical side of things. And so what the road, you know, looks like, what the cross sections look like. It is incorporating a lot of sustainability features because Complete Streets is based on complete mobility in our community. So it looks at sidewalks and bike lanes and transit and how that all integrates into the streetscape. And then the stormwater master plan looks at how to re-infiltrate stormwater back into the ground so it doesn't go to the creek and cause erosion and downstream effects.
Councillor
Can I
Chapman?
ask another question, or do you want to move on to somebody else and then I'll come back?
No, go ahead. You have time.
Well, Dustin, you might want to come back. It has to do with, the parkland dedication section on A9.3. And this I take to be connected to the suburban developments. And I just wonder, we've had this thing in the UGC area where there's no requirement to pay or to have parkland dedication. And I was wondering if in the new subdivisions, we could have something that would require parkland dedication, similar to what we have the contrary of in the UGC area. Like to not accept cash in lieu of, because it would, these are, if we talk about complete streets and complete communities, then we want to ensure that those parkland areas are there from the very beginning.
Through the chair. And so the parkland dedication policy is a separate policy which identifies, how much land is taken or how land is acquired for parkland. And so that is something that's separate from this. This document provides the overall technical specifications for how parkland is constructed. So there is more work that's coming forward on the parkland dedication policy for council's consideration in the future.
Okay, it just was on page 96, so I thought that maybe there needed to be more information about that. And my final question would have to do with the fact there's no mention of lands within the Haldeman Tract. And I ask this because would it be useful to consult with the Indigenous communities to get their feedback on what's being proposed here?
Councillor Chapman, again, this is more on the technical guidelines.
Yeah. Pardon me?
So this is more so on the technical guidelines.
I know, but it includes all of these things, right? I mean, I know it's technical and I get that, but we're talking about a territory that we've acknowledged we're on.
Okay, Mr. Reedman, do you want to address that?
Through the chair. So the region is consulting with Six Nations on the regional official plan and that process. And so they're leading the dialogue on that discussion with Six Nations.
Okay, those are my questions for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chapman. I see no other questions of staff. Can I get a mover? Moved by Councillor Ioannidis. In that case, I will take the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? And that carries. Thank you very much. And that is the entirety of our meeting. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it. And have a great night. See you all.
Hey, everyone.